From the birth of a fragile republic to the global power it would become, the American presidency has shaped the course of history.
Before there was a nation, there was an idea fragile enough to collapse, bold enough to ignite a revolution, and powerful enough to reshape the world. What you're about to witness is not a list of presidents. It's a 235-year experiment in power, an unbroken chain of decisions made by imperfect men under unbearable pressure. Some preserved the Union, some nearly shattered it, some expanded freedom, others exposed its limits. Every single one changed the direction of the United States, and it began with a man who did not want to be king. When George Washington stepped away from military command after defeating the most powerful empire on earth, he could have seized control. Many expected him to. History was filled with victorious generals who refused to give power back. But Washington did something radical. He walked away. That single act stunned the world. It told monarchies across Europe that this new republic might actually be real. When he was called back to preside over the Constitutional Convention, the stakes were higher than the battlefield. The young nation was unraveling under weak federal authority. States bickered, debt mounted, trust eroded. The revolution had been won, but peace was fragile. Washington understood something critical. Winning independence is one thing. Holding a country together is another. As the first president, he built the executive branch from scratch. There were no precedents, no guidebook. He chose the title Mr. President instead of something royal, a small detail. But symbols matter. He established a federal court system, supported the Bill of Rights, balanced competing visions between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And when war broke out again in Europe, he refused to drag America into it. The proclamation of neutrality was controversial. Many wanted revenge against Britain. Washington chose survival instead. But here's the twist: his greatest act of leadership wasn't policy. It was restraint. After 2 terms, he stepped down voluntarily. He could have ruled for life. He didn't. That decision created the most powerful tradition in American political history: peaceful transfer of power. The republic survived its infancy, barely, and then it faced its first true test. John Adams inherited a nation still learning how to breathe, and almost immediately it began choking. John Adams did not inherit calm. He inherited suspicion. France, America's former ally, now saw the young republic as unreliable. British ships still lingered on the horizon. Political factions hardened into rival camps. The friendship forged in revolution was fracturing. Adams believed something dangerous: that democracy could collapse from chaos. So when tensions with France escalated into what became known as the Quasi-War, he resisted calls for full-scale conflict. War would have unified the country temporarily, but it could have destroyed it long-term. Instead, he chose diplomacy. It cost him politically, but it avoided a disaster. Then came the mistake that would define him: the Alien and Sedition Acts. In the name of national security, Adams signed laws that allowed deportation of non-citizens and criminalized criticism of the federal government. The young republic that had fought for liberty was now prosecuting dissent. The backlash was fierce, and when the election of 1800 arrived, it wasn't just another contest. It was a test. Would the country tear itself apart, or would it prove that power could change hands peacefully? Adams lost to his rival Thomas Jefferson. The bitterness was real, the insults personal, but Adams stepped aside. No armies marched, no coups unfolded. For the second time in a decade, the experiment held, and Jefferson took office promising something bold: a revolution without blood. Thomas Jefferson believed America should be a nation of farmers, independent, self-reliant, suspicious of centralized power. He cut military spending, reduced the national debt. He spoke of limited government, but power has a way of reshaping ideals. When Napoleon offered to sell the Louisiana Territory, Jefferson hesitated. The Constitution didn't clearly authorize such a purchase. Strict constructionist principles said no. Opportunity whispered yes. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States overnight. Jefferson chose expansion over doctrine. And just like that, America became continental. But ambition has consequences. Jefferson's Embargo Act, designed to punish Britain and France by halting trade, backfired. American merchants suffered. Coastal economies strained. The man who championed liberty now restricted commerce. It was a reminder that even visionaries miscalculate. Still, the nation was growing, westward, restless, confident, until the British returned. James Madison, often called the father of the Constitution, now found himself defending it in war. British ships harassed American trade. Sailors were impressed into service. National pride boiled. So Madison asked Congress for war. The War of 1812 did not begin gloriously. Washington, D.C. was burned. The White House reduced to smoke and ash. Some states muttered about secession. Sound familiar, but something unexpected happened. Out of humiliation came unity. When the war ended, there was no clear victor, yet Americans felt victorious. National identity hardened. Madison had risked the Republic. It survived again. And as James Monroe stepped into office, a rare calm settled over the country. They called it the era of good feelings. But beneath the surface, pressure was building. The calm felt real. James Monroe presided over a nation that seemed, at least on the surface, united. The Federalist Party had collapsed. Political opposition thinned. Patriotism surged. But unity can be deceptive. Monroe saw what others ignored. European empires were circling the Western Hemisphere again. Spain was weakening. Latin American colonies were fighting for independence. The question wasn't whether America would expand its influence. It was whether it had the nerve to declare it. In 1823, Monroe delivered a message that echoed far beyond Washington. The Monroe Doctrine. Europe was warned. Any attempt to colonize or interfere in the Americas would be viewed as hostile. The United States, still young, still vulnerable, was staking a claim to an entire hemisphere. Bold words, risky words, but they planted a flag in global politics. At home, however, another issue festered: slavery. The Missouri Compromise attempted to balance slave and free states, drawing a line across the map as if moral conflict could be solved with geometry. It worked, temporarily. But here's the truth: compromise delayed the storm. It did not stop it. And when the next president took office, politics turned personal. John Quincy Adams entered the presidency under a cloud. The election of 1824 had no clear winner. The decision went to the House of Representatives. Henry Clay threw his support behind Adams. And when Adams appointed Clay as Secretary of State, whispers began. The corrupt bargain. Whether it was or wasn't, the damage was done. Adams was brilliant, diplomatic, visionary, but he never fully secured the trust of the people. He pushed for infrastructure, roads, canals, scientific advancement. He believed the federal government should shape the nation's future. Congress resisted. His rival waited. And that rival embodied something entirely different: Andrew Jackson. Jackson was not polished, he was not refined, he was not cautious. He was fury wrapped in resolve. A war hero from the Battle of New Orleans. A man who survived duels. A president who, when faced with an assassination attempt, attacked his would-be killer with his cane. He believed he represented the common man, not the elite, and he governed like it. Jackson expanded executive power aggressively. He vetoed bills not just on constitutional grounds, but because he disagreed with them. He dismantled the Second Bank of the United States, calling it corrupt and dangerous. To his supporters, he was a defender of democracy. To his critics, a demagogue. And then came one of the darkest chapters in American history: the Indian Removal Act. Native American tribes were forcibly relocated west of the Mississippi. The Trail of Tears followed. Thousands died. Jackson defended it as necessary for national growth. History remembers it as tragedy. The presidency was no longer restrained. It was muscular, personal, expansive, and it would only grow more powerful from here. But the economic consequences of that era were about to crash down, hard. The crash came quietly at first. Banks failed, credit tightened, confidence evaporated. When Martin Van Buren took office, the panic of 1837 detonated beneath him. He had helped build Andrew Jackson's political machine. Now he inherited its economic aftershocks. Unemployment surged, businesses collapsed, farmers lost land. Van Buren believed government should not interfere too deeply in markets. He held the line. The public did not thank him for it. He became the face of a depression he didn't create and could not contain. And then, in 1841, something unprecedented happened. William Henry Harrison gave the longest inaugural address in history in freezing weather, without a coat. 31 days later, he was dead. The presidency, still young, had just lost its leader mid-sentence. The Constitution was unclear. Did the vice president become president or merely act as one? John Tyler didn't hesitate. He declared himself fully president, and in doing so, he strengthened the continuity of executive power. But Tyler was a man without a party. Expelled from his own political base, he governed in isolation. Still, he pushed one bold move through: the annexation of Texas, a decision that would ignite the next war. James K. Polk entered office with clear goals and ruthless efficiency: expand America. He negotiated the Oregon boundary with Britain. Then he provoked and prosecuted the Mexican-American War. When it ended, the United States gained vast territories stretching to the Pacific: California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah. The map transformed. But here's the twist: every mile gained reopened the slavery question. Would these lands be free or slave? Polk left office having expanded the nation dramatically. He also left it dangerously divided. The pressure cooker was heating. Zachary Taylor, a war hero with no political experience, stepped into the White House with one mission: preserve the Union. He was a slave owner, yet opposed expanding slavery into new territories. His stance angered Southern leaders. Before the crisis could explode, Taylor died in office. Another unexpected vacancy. Power shifted again. Millard Fillmore inherited the conflict and signed the Compromise of 1850, including the Fugitive Slave Act. It required escaped slaves to be returned, even from free states. Northern outrage intensified. Southern demands hardened. Compromise was becoming a ritual, and every compromise made the eventual collision more violent. Then came Franklin Pierce, young, handsome, deeply troubled. His support of the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed territories to decide slavery by popular vote. It sounded democratic. It ignited bloodshed. Bleeding Kansas became a rehearsal for civil war. Pierce watched the country fracture and failed to stop it. He wasn't renominated. His successor would fare no better. James Buchanan believed the Constitution protected slavery. When the Supreme Court delivered the Dred Scott decision, declaring Congress could not restrict slavery in the territories, Buchanan welcomed it. He thought it would settle the debate. It poured gasoline on it. By the time Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, Southern states began seceding. Buchanan insisted the Union was permanent, but he did nothing to prevent its collapse. The nation was splitting in two, and the next president would face the ultimate question: can a republic survive civil war? In March of 1861, the Union was already unraveling. 7 states had seceded. Fort Sumter stood surrounded, and Abraham Lincoln, tall, gaunt, unpolished, walked into the White House carrying the weight of a collapsing nation. He was not the most experienced man in the room. He was not the most feared, but he possessed something rare: moral clarity. When Confederate cannons opened fire on Fort Sumter, the war Lincoln had hoped to avoid became unavoidable. The Civil War was not abstract. It was brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. For Lincoln, the mission was simple in words, impossible in practice: preserve the Union. At first, Slavery was not officially the central cause of the war for the North. But as casualties mounted and the moral stakes sharpened, Lincoln understood something profound. A house divided could not remain half slave and half free. In 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. It did not free every enslaved person overnight, but it transformed the war into a fight for freedom. It redefined the nation's purpose. And when the 13th Amendment abolished slavery permanently, America took one step closer to its founding promise. But victory carried a price. On April 14, 1865, just days after General Lee surrendered, Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theater. The nation that had survived Civil War now faced something almost as destabilizing: leadership without its anchor. He died the next morning, and with him, perhaps, the most generous vision for Reconstruction. Andrew Johnson took the oath in shock. A Southern Democrat elevated by tragedy, he believed in leniency toward the South. Congress did not. Radical Republicans demanded sweeping protections for newly freed Black Americans. Johnson vetoed their legislation repeatedly. Congress overrode him. The power struggle was relentless. When Johnson violated the Tenure of Office Act by removing a cabinet official, the House impeached him. He survived removal by one Senate vote. 1. The presidency had nearly been broken, and Reconstruction, fragile, contested, would falter in the years ahead. But there was one man who understood the battlefield better than politics: Ulysses S. Grant, a Union general turned president. Grant used federal authority to crush the Ku Klux Klan. He supported the 15th Amendment, protecting Black voting rights. For a brief moment, federal power defended civil rights aggressively. But corruption scandals plagued his administration. Even when personally honest, Grant's presidency was shadowed by those around him. The North grew weary of Southern enforcement. Fatigue set in. And in 1877, a disputed election ended Reconstruction. Rutherford B. Hayes withdrew federal troops from the South in exchange for the presidency. It was called compromise. It marked the beginning of Jim Crow. Civil rights protections evaporated. Segregation hardened. Nearly a century would pass before the federal government would intervene again at that scale. The war had ended, but equality had not been secured. America moved forward, industrializing, expanding, modernizing. Yet beneath the railroads and factories, the question of justice lingered. The nation surged into industry. Steel replaced farmland as the symbol of power. Railroads stitched the continent together. Cities rose in smoke and ambition. But politics, still volatile. In 1881, James A. Garfield became president, and within months, he was shot by a disgruntled office seeker who believed he was owed a government job. Garfield lingered for weeks before dying. His assassination exposed a rotting system of patronage, where loyalty, not merit, determined federal appointments. His successor, Chester A. Arthur, was expected to protect that corrupt system. Instead, he shocked everyone. Arthur signed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, requiring government jobs to be earned through examination. It was a quiet revolution. The presidency was beginning to professionalize, but politics remained unpredictable. Then came the man who would serve twice, separated by defeat, Grover Cleveland. He believed government should be limited, honest, disciplined. He vetoed hundreds of bills he saw as wasteful or corrupt. When economic depression struck during his second term, he refused to inflate the currency to ease public pain. He defended the gold standard. To supporters, he was principled. To critics, stubborn. Labor unrest erupted during the Pullman strike. Cleveland sent federal troops to restore order. The message was clear. The presidency would not hesitate to use force to stabilize the nation. But stability was fragile. Benjamin Harrison expanded federal authority in unexpected ways, passing the Sherman Antitrust Act to confront monopolies. The age of giant corporations had begun. Government could no longer pretend business was self-regulating. Power had concentrated, and Washington would have to respond. Then a war changed America's posture forever. William McKinley led the nation into the Spanish-American War. It lasted months. The consequences lasted generations. The United States acquired Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. It was no longer just a continental power. It was an empire. McKinley was assassinated in 1901, and the man who replaced him redefined the presidency. Theodore Roosevelt, energy, force, vision. He believed the president should act boldly unless explicitly forbidden by the Constitution, not cautiously, boldly. He broke up monopolies, regulated food and drugs, preserved millions of acres of wilderness. He mediated peace between Russia and Japan, earning a Nobel Prize, and he spoke softly while carrying a very big stick. Roosevelt saw America as a global power and acted like it. The Panama Canal carved through continents under his watch. The presidency was no longer reactive. It was proactive, expansive, confident, but progressives soon divided. Roosevelt's successor, William Howard Taft, filed even more antitrust suits, yet lacked Roosevelt's charisma. Tariff battles fractured the Republican Party. The split handed victory to a reformer with academic precision, and a global crisis on the horizon. Woodrow Wilson reshaped domestic finance by creating the Federal Reserve System. He strengthened antitrust laws. Then Europe erupted into World War I. Wilson promised neutrality. He was re-elected on it. Then he asked Congress for war. The world had become too interconnected. American troops crossed the Atlantic. And when the war ended, Wilson proposed something revolutionary: the League of Nations, a global body to prevent future wars. But here's the irony: the Senate rejected it. America retreated inward again. The presidency had tried to shape world peace. The country wasn't ready. And in the 1920s, it wanted something simpler. Normalcy, normalcy, that was the promise. After war, after reform, after global entanglement, Americans wanted calm, stability, prosperity. Warren G. Harding delivered the message with confidence. Government would ease off, business would flourish, regulation would loosen. And for a moment it worked. The economy surged, industry roared, but behind closed doors, corruption festered. The Teapot Dome scandal revealed secret leasing of federal oil reserves in exchange for bribes. The public trust cracked again. Harding died in office before the full scandal exploded. His successor, Calvin Coolidge, restored confidence not through charisma but restraint. Silent Cal. He believed the business of America was business. Taxes were cut. Regulation stayed minimal. The stock market climbed. Radios filled living rooms. Cars filled highways. It felt unstoppable. But here's the danger of euphoria: risk hides in plain sight. Speculation ballooned. Credit expanded recklessly. And when Herbert Hoover took office in 1929, the illusion shattered. The stock market crashed. Banks collapsed. Unemployment soared past anything Americans had ever witnessed. Hoover believed deeply in limited government intervention. He encouraged voluntary cooperation between businesses. It wasn't enough. Breadlines stretched through cities. Shantytowns were nicknamed Hoovervilles. The presidency seemed powerless against economic freefall, until a new voice promised action. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, confined to a wheelchair by polio, though the public rarely saw it, he projected strength, confidence, warmth. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. With the New Deal, Roosevelt expanded federal power more aggressively than any president before him. Social security, banking reform, public works programs. The government was no longer a distant referee. It became an active participant in economic survival. Critics called it overreach. Supporters called it salvation. Then came December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor. America entered World War II. Roosevelt mobilized industry at unprecedented scale. Factories became arsenals. The United States emerged not just victorious, but dominant, a global superpower. FDR was elected 4 times. 4. The nation trusted him in crisis. But in April 1945, as the war neared its end, Roosevelt died. Power transferred suddenly, and the man who inherited it faced a decision no leader had ever confronted before. Harry S. Truman, plainspoken, unassuming, and suddenly responsible for the most destructive weapon in human history, the atomic bomb. Truman weighed invasion casualties against unimaginable devastation. He authorized the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II ended. The Cold War began. Truman committed the United States to containment of Soviet expansion through the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan, and NATO. America would no longer retreat from global leadership. It would shape it. When North Korea invaded the South, Truman sent troops under the banner of the United Nations. The presidency was now commander of a permanent global military presence. The world had changed, and so had American power. The next president would be a general, but his battlefield would not be Europe, it would be ideology. The uniform was gone, but the discipline remained. Dwight D. Eisenhower entered the White House as the supreme Allied commander who had orchestrated D-Day. He understood war, and more importantly, he understood its cost. He ended the Korean War quietly. No grand victory speeches, just an armistice. Stalemate, not surrender. Eisenhower believed in strength without recklessness. He expanded America's nuclear arsenal, yet warned in his farewell address of the military-industrial complex. A sitting president cautioning against the very machine he commanded. That mattered. At home, he signed the Interstate Highway Act, a vast network of roads that would reshape commerce, culture, and defense. Suburbs expanded, mobility increased, America accelerated. But beneath the calm exterior of the 1950s, social tension simmered, and the next president would embody generational change. John F. Kennedy, young, charismatic, telegenic. He didn't just speak to Americans, he inspired them. Ask not what your country can do for you. His presidency was brief, barely 1,000 days, but packed with consequence. The Cold War intensified. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion embarrassed the administration. Then came October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days. Soviet nuclear missiles stationed 90 miles from Florida. The world held its breath. Kennedy resisted military advisors pushing for airstrikes. He chose a naval blockade, a measured show of force. Back-channel negotiations followed. The missiles were withdrawn. Nuclear war was avoided. But here's the reality. The margin was razor-thin. In 1963, Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. Another generation shocked. Another presidency cut short. And power passed again, this time to a master of Congress. Lyndon B. Johnson, towering, persuasive, relentless. He pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Landmark legislation. America confronted its racial injustice with federal authority. Johnson declared a Great Society, Medicare, Medicaid, anti-poverty programs. Domestic reform surged forward, but overseas Vietnam escalated. Troop levels climbed, casualties mounted. Television brought the war into American living rooms. Protests erupted. The country fractured. Johnson chose not to seek re-election. The war had consumed his presidency, and the nation turned to a man promising order. Richard Nixon. Strategic, calculated, complex. He opened diplomatic relations with China, reshaping global geopolitics. He pursued détente with the Soviet Union. He created the Environmental Protection Agency. He withdrew American troops from Vietnam, achievements that altered history. But then came Watergate, a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, a cover-up, secret tapes. The Supreme Court ordered their release. The evidence was undeniable. Facing impeachment, Nixon resigned. The first and only president to do so. Trust in government plummeted, and the presidency, once regal, now seemed vulnerable. The next man inherited not just office, but a crisis of faith. Gerald Ford never campaigned for the presidency. He never won a national election. He was appointed vice president, and then, after Nixon resigned, sworn in. An unelected president in a shaken republic. 1 month later, he made a decision that would define him. He pardoned Richard Nixon, not quietly, not ambiguously, fully, completely. Ford believed the country needed healing, not prolonged spectacle. He believed dragging a former president through trial would tear the nation open again. But many Americans saw it differently. They saw protection. They saw privilege. His approval ratings collapsed. And yet Ford steadied the ship through inflation, recession, and the lingering scars of Watergate. He restored a measure of dignity, but the country was restless. Energy shortages, gas lines, economic stagnation. The mood had shifted, and voters turned to an outsider. Jimmy Carter arrived in Washington promising honesty, a peanut farmer from Georgia, a man who spoke openly about his faith and humility. After the secrecy of Watergate that mattered, Carter brokered the Camp David Accords, a historic peace agreement between Egypt and Israel. It was a diplomatic triumph, but at home, the economy struggled with inflation and unemployment, stagflation. Then came the Iran hostage crisis. American diplomats held captive for 444 days. Every evening, the crisis was counted down on television. It overshadowed everything. Carter appeared steady but strained, and in 1980 the country pivoted sharply. Ronald Reagan, former actor, former governor, communicator, he projected optimism, strength, confidence. Reagan slashed taxes, reduced regulation, and increased defense spending. Reaganomics promised growth through market freedom. The economy rebounded after a painful recession. On the global stage, Reagan confronted the Soviet Union directly, calling it an evil empire. Then something unexpected happened. Negotiation. Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev met repeatedly. Arms reduction treaties followed. In 1987, Reagan stood in Berlin and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." 2 years later, the Berlin Wall fell. The Cold War was ending, not with nuclear fire, but with collapse. The Soviet Union dissolved. America stood alone as the world's sole superpower. But power brings new responsibilities and new complications. George H.W. Bush inherited a transforming world. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, Bush built a vast international coalition. Operation Desert Storm drove Iraqi forces out swiftly. Precision warfare, clear objectives, mission accomplished without occupying Baghdad. His foreign policy experience was undeniable, but at home, recession returned, and he broke a campaign promise. Read my lips, no new taxes, voters remembered. In 1992, the Cold War veteran was defeated. A new generation was rising. A new generation. You could feel it in the tone, in the saxophone on late-night television, in the phrase, "It's the economy." Bill Clinton arrived in Washington young, energetic, and politically gifted. He positioned himself between ideological extremes, a new Democrat. Under his administration, the economy boomed. Technology exploded. The internet entered homes. The federal budget reached surplus for the first time in decades. Welfare reform reshaped social policy. NAFTA deepened trade with Canada and Mexico, praised by some, criticized by others who saw manufacturing jobs disappear. Prosperity defined the era, but power is never insulated from scandal. In 1998, Clinton was impeached by the House of Representatives over his conduct involving a White House intern. The Senate acquitted him. He remained in office. Approval ratings stayed high even as trust fractured. It was a strange paradox: economic strength, moral controversy. And beneath the surface, a new threat was rising, largely unnoticed. On September 11, 2001, that threat struck. George W. Bush had been in office less than a year when hijacked planes slammed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. The world changed in a morning. Bush stood on the rubble with a bullhorn and promised resolve. The war on terror began. Afghanistan first, to dismantle al-Qaeda. Then Iraq, under the assertion that weapons of mass destruction posed imminent danger. Those weapons were never found. The Iraq War became one of the most debated decisions in modern American history. At home, the Patriot Act expanded surveillance powers. Security increased, so did division. Then came Hurricane Katrina, images of devastation and federal response failures. And in 2008, the financial system teetered. Banks collapsed, markets froze, the Great Recession began. Bush left office amid economic crisis and fatigue from prolonged war. The presidency had expanded enormously in scope: commander of global conflict, guardian of homeland security, steward of financial rescue. And the next leader would carry symbolic weight beyond policy. Barack Obama, the first African-American president. His election was historic. He inherited recession, 2 wars, and political polarization. The Affordable Care Act aimed to expand healthcare coverage to millions. Supporters called it transformative. Opponents called it government overreach. He authorized the operation that killed Osama bin Laden in 2011, a defining counterterrorism moment. He pursued diplomacy, reopening relations with Cuba, negotiating the Iran nuclear agreement, emphasizing multinational cooperation. At home, social movements intensified, from marriage equality to racial justice protests. The country felt energized and divided. By the end of his second term, political polarization had hardened. Trust in institutions was strained. And then came a candidate who rejected political convention entirely. Donald Trump, businessman, television personality, political outsider. He spoke directly, often bluntly, through social media. His campaign disrupted traditional politics. As president, he pursued tax cuts, deregulation, and strict immigration enforcement. He withdrew from international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal. He renegotiated trade agreements under an America First doctrine. Supporters saw strength and disruption of the establishment. Critics saw volatility and division. He was impeached twice, first over Ukraine, then following the events surrounding January 6th, both times acquitted in the Senate. Then came 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic, economic shutdowns, a bitter election. Trump lost re-election, but the political era he shaped did not end. It intensified. In January 2021, amid masks, distancing, and a nation still reeling from pandemic and political unrest, Joe Biden took the oath of office. He framed his presidency around restoration, restoring alliances, restoring institutional norms, restoring stability after one of the most turbulent election cycles in modern history. The pandemic was still raging, hospitals overwhelmed, businesses strained, families grieving. Biden pushed forward a massive vaccination campaign and a sweeping economic relief package designed to stabilize households and prevent deeper collapse. The economy rebounded faster than many expected, but inflation surged. Supply chains tangled. Global tensions intensified, particularly with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, drawing the United States into a new era of strategic confrontation without direct boots on the ground. Biden emphasized coalition building, rallying NATO, reinforcing partnerships in Asia, re-engaging in climate agreements. Yet at home, political division did not cool. It calcified. Congress gridlocked. Culture wars deepened. Trust in institutions continued to erode. The presidency had become not just a governing office, but a symbolic battlefield for America's identity. And then something happened that had only occurred once before in American history. A former president returned. In 2024, Donald Trump reclaimed the White House, becoming the second president ever to serve non-consecutive terms. The first had been Grover Cleveland more than a century earlier, but the context was radically different. The political environment was more polarized, the media landscape more fragmented, the electorate more entrenched. Trump's return was not simply a comeback. It was a statement, a reaffirmation by his supporters that disruption, nationalism, and direct confrontation with entrenched systems remained necessary. His second administration began with renewed focus on immigration enforcement, trade renegotiations, and aggressive recalibration of America's role in global alliances. Supporters described it as unfinished business. Opponents described it as escalation. And once again, the presidency stood at the center of a cultural storm. From Washington's restraint to Lincoln's resolve, from Roosevelt's expansion of government to Reagan's rollback from the Cold War's end, to the war on terror, from pandemic shutdowns to political realignment, the office of the President of the United States has never been static. It has grown, contracted, expanded in crisis, tested by scandal, redefined by war. Every president inherited a nation shaped by the one before him. Every decision carried consequences beyond a single term. Some preserved the Union, some nearly fractured it, some expanded freedom, some exposed its contradictions. But the experiment continues. The question has never changed. Can a republic built on ideals survive power, pressure, and personality? For more than 2 centuries, the answer has been complicated, messy, imperfect, but enduring. And the story is still unfolding. Power was never meant to be comfortable. From the beginning, the presidency has lived in tension, between liberty and order, between restraint and expansion, between idealism and survival. George Washington feared becoming a king. Abraham Lincoln feared losing a nation. Franklin Roosevelt feared economic collapse and then global annihilation. Harry Truman feared what the atomic age would unleash. John Kennedy feared nuclear war. Ronald Reagan feared stagnation and decline. George W. Bush feared another attack. Barack Obama feared systemic failure. Donald Trump feared institutional decay. Joe Biden feared democratic erosion. Different eras, different threats, same office. The presidency is not simply a job. It is a pressure chamber. Every decision magnified, every hesitation scrutinized, every mistake immortalized. Some presidents expanded executive power in crisis, arguing that survival demanded it. Others tried to restrain it, warning that concentrated authority could threaten liberty itself. The pendulum swings. It always has. War expands power. Peace questions it. Crisis centralizes authority. Prosperity decentralizes it. And the American people decide over and over what kind of leadership they believe the moment requires. But here's the truth that history makes unavoidable. No president governs alone. Congress resists. Courts intervene. States challenge. The press investigates. Citizens protest. The presidency is powerful, but it is never absolute. That tension is not weakness. It is design. And yet personalities matter. Character matters. Temperament matters. In moments of uncertainty, the individual in that office can calm a nation or inflame it, unify or divide, preserve or destabilize. From horseback generals to radio voices, from black and white television to viral social media, the medium has changed. The scrutiny has intensified. The expectations have multiplied, but the oath remains the same: to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not a party, not a platform, the Constitution. That document, born in compromise, amended through struggle, defended through war, is the silent thread connecting every presidency. Some stretched it, some reinterpreted it, some tested its limits, but none have replaced it. And that may be the most remarkable fact of all. Empires have risen and fallen in the time America has debated itself. Monarchies collapsed, dictatorships hardened, superpowers dissolved. The United States has stumbled, fractured, protested, impeached, expanded, corrected, and recalibrated. But the transfer of power has endured. That tradition, born when Washington stepped away voluntarily, remains the quiet miracle of the experiment. It has been tested, severely, but it remains. And so the question is no longer just about who sits in the Oval Office. It is about whether the republic itself can continue adapting without losing its core. The presidency will change again. It always does. Technology will evolve, global threats will shift, political coalitions will realign, new crises will emerge, new leaders will rise, some will surprise, some will disappoint, some will leave legacies debated for generations, but the office will remain, watching, weighing, deciding, because in the end the presidency is not a throne, it is a mirror. It reflects the fears, ambitions, values, and divisions of the American people at any given moment. And as long as the experiment continues, the story is not finished. It never will be.
Presidents rise, presidents fall. But the story of power and the consequences of leadership is never truly finished.